First time I've entered a lecture with an applause. I'm going to have to actually start asking my students to do that. I have to think on that. Anyway, so yeah, I was nominated for your last lecture, and all of a sudden I thought I was getting fired. This is going to be your last lecture. And then I started reading into it and realized, oh, this is an honor. So I am privileged to be here. When asked to come up with a title, and it was a few months ago, this is a working title, and it stuck: a minute of your time. And I wanted, hopefully, touch on some topics of self-worth, avoiding discouragement, not burning bridges, and taking chances. And hopefully that will apply to not only our current students or younger students, but just about anybody. And I can promise you this will take more than a minute. So my name is Brandon Lettow. I am the Instructional Program Manager for Theater and Entertainment Technologies. I also do the majority of the teaching for that program. But we're not going to talk about theater today. I don't know who voted for me on this, but thank you, students, or not thank you. I don't know. This is good. I don't know who wanted to hear me ramble more, but here we go. That said, I am going to ask a couple of questions throughout this, and maybe prod the mind just a hair. If you would respond back, that would be welcome. That way, I'm not barking up here for the whole duration, although it would be a little shorter. So on the topic of self-worth, jumping into it. Have you ever thought about what you bring to the table as a whole? Like, really, what do you bring to the table in any kind of situation? Maybe you have a lot of experience in a field or a particular knowledge in a subject. There's always value there. So how do you quantify the price, or how do you put a price tag or dollar amount on your value? And it's something that we used to talk about. I say we, one of my past degrees, I was an art student. We used to talk about it. And how do you try to value a piece of work, right? You have to think about the time it takes to make that work. Additionally, the time that it took to get to that practice that got you to the level of success that you're at. You have to think about the materials that you use to craft this work, right? And you can't forget about all of the education, the expensive education that got you to the level that you're at. So again, we would think about all of these things, and when we came up with a price tag, it would be incredibly less than if you added all those up at once, but of course we try to spread that out over multiple pieces of work. How do you know if you're selling yourself short? In the art community, it's difficult to determine whether or not you're pricing something at the right point. Sometimes you have to look at someone who's comparable in skills and say, I must be somewhere in that ballpark. Sometimes you're working in an industry that they have fixed prices. Regardless of your abilities, if you take this position, that's all you're going to get paid. Again, how do you know if you're selling yourself short? Circling back to college, and I'm a big advocate for college, by the way. I myself have been a student for 16 plus years. Have you ever broken down the dollar amount per class? Have you ever thought about how much you're investing in yourself? College is an investment for one class. Now, I haven't been at FSCJ all that long, but I did take the time to break it down. Anybody know how much for one class of a 15-week, 3-credit class? Anybody want to throw out a number?
$4.30, I think.
$4.30 or $430 for the whole class? Okay, very close in that regard, thinking of the whole semester. But let's think about one individual day in one class. Dollar amount. Anybody want to wander a guess? Okay. If you take a 3-credit class that meets twice a week for 15 weeks, and FSCJ, just to do some math, average cost per credit, it's $104 to $116 for in-state folks. Divide 3 classes by twice a week for 15 weeks. It works out to $11 a class, $11 per individual session. Now, I hope you think at that point that you would agree that FSCJ is a good value, but I also think this is where we're getting our term paying attention. And there's nothing wrong with trying to get a fair deal or a good deal. That said, we've heard the idea of, can you do it cheaper? I know I have. Can you do it cheaper? And if you look hard enough in life, you'll always find somebody who can do it something cheaper. But it's often called cutting corners. It's not good. I like to use an example of a general contractor. And I'm going to use a fictitious example of making a gazebo in your backyard. Let's say that general contractor said they would build that gazebo as you wanted it. It cost you $5,000. And in that, they factored in the cost of supplies, the cost of transportation to get the materials there, the tools necessary to build it, the time to build it, and the additional labor maybe to build it. The cost of experience, education, the cost of maintaining certificates, and the cost of insurance. Now, if you say, hey, all you're doing is cutting some boards and slapping it together with some nails, even if they don't take offense to this, they're looking at only the small picture. Because if you're asking them to do something cheaper, well, I'll act as the general contractor here. I can say this is where you can go buy those supplies, go to the hardware store and buy them. And even at today's wood prices, $5,000 would be a little excessive for just the lumber alone. Oh, but you can't fit the lumber in your car. Okay, all right. Well, I can rent you my pickup to transport the lumber back to the site. Okay. But you don't have the tools to, well, I can also rent you my tools in order to build this. But you're really not sure where to start. Well, I can tell you first start with step 1 and start with step 2, but my time has value. I can also tell you that if you mess up, you're responsible for your own repairs. I can also then tell you that it will take you about a week to assemble, and you're going to need to take time off of work. And all of a sudden, that $5,000 price tag seems a lot more reasonable. Time is a precious commodity. I think there is a saying, you don't want to waste time, you can never get it back. And that's a very true statement. And that's what led me to the title of this lecture, A Minute of Your Time. How much is a minute of your time worth? And I'm going to ask this again. Please respond. If I were to ask you how much 1 minute of your time is worth to you, how much would it be? And if you say $1 million, you're not necessarily wrong, but you will never get that. Anybody want to offer up how much a minute of their time is worth? Yeah, go ahead. $1 is a minute of your time is worth $1. Okay, anybody else? Actually, before I go on, is there any reason that you put that price tag on that?
It's more than I currently make.
Great, excellent, perfect. I love it. But it's true, you think that you're more valuable than you currently are getting, and I think we all should think that. Yes, all right, there's another hand.
40 cents.
40 cents, fantastic. And do you have any kind of reasoning how you got to that?
The independent sector indicates that if you were to, on average, pay someone what it would cost for them to volunteer their time, U.S. on average, it's $24 approximately.
Okay.
So if you were to break that down by a minute or an hour, it's 40 cents.
40 cents, perfect. Now, believe it or not, that 40 cents is going to come, or close to it, it's going to come back up in a minute. For perspective, the richest person in America, I think we might know who that is, makes $3.20 a minute, less all of his investments. So we're talking about income alone, $3.20. If you want to talk about assets and all that, that's another lecture altogether. All right. Make sure I don't lose my pages here. Your value to an employer. And this is where we got our $1 and saying it's more than you currently make. Using the analogy or the example of a $40,000 job, we'll say salary. $40,000 broken down across 52 weeks at 40 hours a week, which we all know we only work 40 hours a week, at 60 minutes an hour works out to 32 cents a minute. So if you have a $40,000 an hour job, you're making 32 cents a minute. That is your worth as deemed by the employer. And actually, they'll tell you that you're indispensable or invaluable. You're worth more than they can pay you. I'm sure we all hear this, but that, at the end of the day, is the paycheck that comes in. How much, and we've established that there's a difference, how much is a minute worth to you? And sometimes people haven't really thought too much about what that means. I like to put it this way. And I'm going to put it in terms of an hour, just for this, 60 minutes of your time. How much would you pay to be able to have an hour's worth of sleep? How much would you pay to have an hour's worth of Netflix and chill? How much would you pay to be able to play video games or hang out with friends? Not long ago, maybe a couple years ago, I thought an hour of my time was worth $25. So, to me, 42 cents a minute. And I figured this out, that was a determining factor on many different tasks that I had to do. And I thought this way. If there was something I didn't want to do, genuinely did not want to do it, if I could pay someone to do it for less than $25 an hour, I thought I was doing well. Now, no, I'm not trying to figure out the cost of being lazy, but I used this to decide. An example. If I think my time is worth $25 an hour, and I have an hour's worth of mowing the lawn that I should be doing out in the front yard, if I can find someone who will mow my yard for less than that, I am up $5, or I've accumulated the value of $5 by being stationary or doing what I want to do instead. Again, not trying to find the value of being lazy. Another example that might spin this a little better. We've all had to have cars worked on right. It gets real expensive. I think the average shop rate for independent mechanics was around $65 an hour, plus parts. So if a shop is going to charge $65 an hour to work on your car, and I happen to know a thing or two about working on cars, which I do, if my rate to me is only $25 an hour and their rate is $65 an hour, I'm paying myself $40 an hour to work on my own car. Now all of a sudden, that makes a little more sense. And I do enjoy working on cars, but I also know my limits. Some things I can't do. In that comparison, again, the mowing of the lawn or the working on the car, I'm going to throw a business concept at you, and it's called opportunity cost. And basically, that's the cost to do something other than what you're currently doing, or to put it a different way, it's the cost difference of doing one thing versus another. So in the case of mowing lawn or working on truck, if I had both things going on concurrently, paying someone to mow the lawn while working on my truck, I'm still money ahead in that same hour. Okay. Continuing on with the concept of value. How do we value our time? Not the price tag, but how do we value our time? I have, there might be more, but I have limited or reduced it down to 3 different ways. The first we're all familiar with. First one, we know that our employer pays us money, or we do a job for a friend and they give us money, or some other kind of direct collateral. we have a financial reward. Okay? The next one that I've kind of written down here is an intrinsic reward. Sometimes there's no money involved. Sometimes we could say we're doing it out of the kindness of our heart, usually in the term or concept of volunteering, right? We feel better about ourselves. We're getting something rewarding by doing it, no money involved. And the next and last option, and I'm going to label it networking, and there's probably better titles, but it's doing something for no cost, knowing that it will lead to money or jobs in the future. In college, we like to call that internships, right? You know, getting your foot in the door or getting your feet wet and learning on the job. You're still getting something, you're making connections, but there's not necessarily money involved. If you talk to some of our music friends, not necessarily here, they call that exposure. Now, exposure comes with some negative connotations, so I will throw this out. When it comes to exposure, doing something that will generate money or jobs in the future, let you be the one who decides whether or not it's good for you, not somebody else. Because more often than not, it's good for exposure, it's good for exposure, it's good for exposure. Yeah, but exposure doesn't pay the bills. We've heard this. Any students in here who are going to be going looking for a job real soon? Yes, no, maybe? Nope, everybody's employed? That's fine. If we have anybody going into the job market soon, I offer this. Don't get discouraged, period. Just don't, right? Done. No, that's not true. Don't get discouraged, or try not to. And in this day and age with, I'm going to say the pandemic word, the market is wonky. So if you have your job, be fortunate. If not, don't get discouraged. And this is what I'll offer to our digital audience. During a time where discouragement could be high, try to continue to do what makes you happy. Try to keep your spirits up. Socialize with people who put a smile on your face. Sing, play music, play with your dog, go to the beach. Try to keep a positive attitude. And then take a step back and look at what is making you happy. I'm going to give you an example that applies to me. And really soon you're going to realize I'm much of a maker. I like to play with speakers. I'm a bit of an audiophile, specifically in my truck that I like to work on, right? So I like to build speaker boxes. It's one of my hobbies. And in a time where there's some uncertainty financially, I took a step back and realized, maybe there's something that could be profitable from one of my hobbies. So in the case of my speaker box, I designed a small speaker enclosure for the inside to make my truck sound that much better. And I took the time to figure out how to make it. Strangely enough, nobody else had really made one of those for my truck. It seems like an opportunity. So I took the plans, the drawings on how to craft this, and made them available. Small fee. Used eBay. And over 3 years, in selling them for a small fee, I made enough money to pay for the truck. So, if you can find those opportunities buried within things that you like, if nothing else, call it a side hustle, but that can be a nice stopgap in a time of discouragement. Getting back to applications, again, this is for our digital audience, because everybody here is already gainfully employed. Applications are a numbers game. Don't get discouraged. Your odds improve with every application that you put in. Something else to think about. If you don't meet all the qualifications for a job, within reason, you still should apply. And that might be a surprise to some. That said, please be truthful. No lying on an application. Don't do that. Wrong answer. But for example, if there's a job that says that you need 3 years worth of experience and you only have 2, that doesn't straight up exclude you. Consider it. Maybe they don't have any applicants that have 3 years experience and everybody else only has 1. Then you're already looking better than the rest. If they want somebody with a degree and you're on your final year, put or list expected graduation date. All right? That is, it's coming. It's just a matter of time. And that way it would not exclude you from being a candidate. Now I'm going to tell a little story after I grab a sip of water here. Anybody remember what, does anybody remember what happened in 2008-ish in the economy? Ah, there it is. I graduated college in 2009. The country was trying to recover from a financial crisis in 2008. We called it the Great Recession. My last term and going into summer, I applied to 110 jobs. 110. Lots of rejections, got 2 offers. One of those offers, and the one I ultimately took, was out of college. Happened to be in Illinois. And when I got there, I asked, I guess it was my supervisor at the time, who happened to also be on the search committee, I asked, is there any reason or anything you could tell me as to why I specifically was selected? And he told me a little story, and little did I know, the outcome of that story, is that one of my professors at my college that I was just graduating from used to be an alum from there. And it didn't matter about my references, and it didn't matter about my letters of recommendation. They reached out to the professor of mine and asked a bit about me. It's a good thing I left a good impression on that professor, because he could have just as easily said, oh yeah, not worth the salt, move on. Which leads me to my next point. Don't burn bridges. Don't unnecessarily remove opportunities for yourself. And unless you can 100% guarantee you will never need that person, that institution, that organization ever again, in any circle or any kind of thing that they might have a by proxy involvement in, I always recommend, if anything, leave on neutral terms, preferably positive ones. Similar situation for our engineering friends. Do you think there's a possibility that your engineering professor might be known by an engineering firm in the area? Where do we think FSCJ gets their experienced professors? They used to work in the same places that you might be applying to. So, and it's not just engineering. Employers exercise all the resources available to them all the time. They're crafty folks. Again, I say, don't burn bridges. Next one, or next topic, if you will, taking chances. I've heard this saying, it says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, which I think is a bit of a basketball reference. That said, keep your resume current. Even if you're happily employed, which apparently is all of us, keep your resume current. If anything else, it's less time to keep it or update it if an opportunity presents itself. And sometimes they sneak up on you when you least expect it. That 1 in a million job you never thought was going to come down presents itself. You've got it ready to go with minimal extra effort. Perhaps you've abandoned a job because the job application required letters of recommendation. I know I've done this. I've said, I really don't want to trouble my past professors. I don't want to trouble my past colleagues. I'm just going to write that one off. Try to avoid that kind of discouragement or inconveniencing of again, colleagues, professors. You can make a situation like that a lot better if you request a letter of recommendation early. Say that you're on great terms, or maybe you just gotten back from a conference with somebody that you work with and you had a really great time, both had a good positive experience. Then's the time to say, hey, you know what, I think maybe in light of all this, we should write a generalized letter of recommendation, something to keep in your back pocket. Never hurts. At the same time, identify your people of reference early. People who would speak well on your behalf, not necessarily the ones you're going to ask to write a letter, but ones who could speak to an employer on your behalf. All that said, and again, I say early here, I think I speak for all the professors when it comes to being asked to write letters of recommendation. The last thing we want to do is craft a letter with 1 to 2 days turnaround, right? And honestly, what level of letter of recommendation are we going to get with that short notice? It's always nice to give us as much notice as you can prior to submitting it for an application. And to continue with that, it's always a courtesy to let us know if you've applied to a job and you've used us as a person of reference. The last thing that we need is to get a notice out of the blue from some employer saying, Susie has applied for a job and we want to talk to you about it. Yeah, good. That's what Susie's been up to. No. Reach out. Let us know. My last bit of advice. And again, this is for our digital friends because we're all gainfully employed here. These are for the folks who are just about to enter the workplace. Negotiate. Even if you're not the greatest negotiator, remember that you can negotiate. If you're hired into a position with a set wage or set salary like I mentioned earlier, maybe you're kind of stuck. You accepted or you applied for that job knowing that's the exact amount, period. But many job listings have a range. Pays $40,000 to $50,000. Or they might say something along the lines of low to mid 40s, implying 40,000. Or they don't list anything at all, which is the most annoying. If it's a job you want, it's the perfect time to ask. It's the perfect time to negotiate. And if you feel like by asking them, or you feel uncomfortable because you feel like they're doing you a favor by employing you, you're equally doing them a favor by working for them. So the playing field is even. Some of the easy ways to ask. Say, hey, is there any flexibility in salary or room to negotiate? Would your employer assist with moving costs? Things that otherwise you'd incur. Is there any allowance for whatever it is necessary for you to do and perform your job to the best of your ability? These are things you can ask for. The only for sure thing you won't get is what you don't ask for. So, negotiate. That said, I appreciate you guys listening. And I also appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.